How surprising is all this and the move from Pelosi in particular?
Well, in some ways it's not surprising because, we know that tensions have really been building between Trump and Nancy Pelosi over the past several weeks, ever since particularly she launched this impeachment inquiry. Now, it sounds like that didn't come up overtly in the meeting. Obviously, it was about Syria and, the response to Turkey on that. However, it seems like this was a moment where things perhaps just boiled over.
Yeah, and I mean, Republicans saying that it's the Speaker at fault for walking out of the meeting. Just talk us through what this means sort of for any political tactics for the Democrats.
Well, I think for Democrats, there is a bit of a risk here that the storyline or the narrative, which had been really focused on the Republican rebuke of Trump over Syria, is now going to kind of refocus on this sort of partisan battle between Trump and Pelosi. When in some ways that has the risk of, not necessarily helping Democrats, because Democrats win when Republicans are divided and people are focused on that. However, I think it does paint potentially Trump as a bit unhinged. What I think was Pelosi's point strategically in doing this is to call attention to her accusation, essentially, that the president had a meltdown and try to paint him as someone who's not fully in control as she pursues her impeachment inquiry.
Yeah, and we saw that quite extraordinary letter released on social media as well.
Absolutely, and I think that, it's not surprising in some ways that, like, from Pelosi's standpoint strategically, that gives her some latitude to walk out of the meeting and paint him as kind of the unhinged one after that letter comes out, because I think that the tone of the letter was, while quite Trumpian, I don't think not the tone that we usually see from a president. It read more like his Twitter feed than it did like something that you typically see on White House letterhead.
Yeah.
And so I think perhaps Pelosi's trying to capitalize on that, from a political standpoint as well.
What could happen next, briefly? Mike Pence heading to Ankara, I understand?
Yeah, and so that's really kind of the next sort of inflection point, potentially. Mike Pence and also Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, are going to be in Ankara, and the question is, whether they make any kind of headway in that meeting. I don't know that, from my perspective, the expectations would be that high, given that Trump has kind of already given the green light to some things, and there's been a lot of back and forth. I think from Turkey's perspective, it might be hard to see a red line coming out of the White House from, especially when Trump, who's the principal, isn't sitting in the room.